Well, hello and welcome to this episode of The Terry Cole Show. I am so excited and grateful that you're spending a little bit of time with me today. So in today's episode, we are going to be talking about how you can become a master attractor in your life. I have been covering topics that people are writing in through email, and a woman wrote in and asked me about how she can sort of become irresistible in her dating life. There's so many rules, there's so many dating, what you should and shouldn't do. Now, I'm coming at it more, obviously, from a psychological point of view, because that is what I do, rather than wait 2 days to text someone back. That's less my jam. And really, psychologically, figuring out how you can become irresistible sort of to yourself. That then puts it out there into the world. Before I get into the content for today, though, I wanted to let you know that I am doing a free workshop series in September, starting on the 10th. And I don't want you to miss it. It's 3 free workshops all about how to get your boundaries on, communicate effectively, all the things I love to share with you. So there's a link right here in the show notes. If you're listening to this as a podcast, it'll be in the show notes. If you're watching it on YouTube, it'll be right in the information below the video or on my website, terrycole.com. The links will be everywhere. You'll find them. Do not miss it. All right, moving into how can you become a master attractor? So let's start with, I broke it into 8 steps. So let's start with the first one, which is basically about your blueprint, your attraction blueprint, your love blueprint, what you've already experienced sort of in your life. But we start with what you learned from your family of origin. So there'll be a downloadable guide, basically, so you don't have to take notes if you don't want to, where I'm giving you just a couple of questions so that you can get a good idea of what is your blueprint. We all have these downloaded, unconscious blueprints about everything. So in this particular case, it can be about love, it can be about mating, it can be about marriage, it can be about dating. So I'll give you a couple of questions so that you can look at, what do you think unconsciously about this? Because so much of the time, what is happening with us unconsciously is actually sabotaging what we are trying to consciously achieve in our lives. So we take this information, like I like to say, from the basement, which is the unconscious mind, the basement of the house, into the main part of the house, which is your conscious mind. Because how can we change anything that we are unaware of? We cannot. So that's going to be the first step, is you answer those questions and start to get an idea of what you learned in the family you grew up in, the culture you grew up in, the country you grew up in, that all of those things influence what you think, especially unconsciously, about love and dating. The second step is going to be about your own repeating romantic realities, I call them. So I'm going to give you a couple of cues, questions that you can answer to be able to identify what have you been repeating that you don't want to continue repeating in your love relationships. This may be not dating at all. That can be a repetition. This might be dating unavailable men or women over and over again, even though they may look different. When you first get attracted to them, they may end up the same. When I started dating, before I understood my own downloaded love blueprint, I was desperately trying to avoid dating anyone like my dad, because he was very emotionally unavailable, very closed off, a workaholic. All he did was golf and drink, and that was what he did. Although he was very successful, he was not available. So I was conscious, like, I don't want a guy like that. I want someone who is romantic, who is affectionate, who is verbal. And so I was very attracted to European men, because naturally they were more that than a lot of the American men that I had dated. And so I would find myself in relationships with European men who either lived in Greece or lived in Germany or lived in Paris. And what do you think that was? Oh, that was a repetition, right? That was a repeating romantic reality for me, because in the end, did I end up happy, satisfied, and in a great relationship where I woke up every day with that person? No, I did not. I ended up feeling the same way, which was longing, lonely, and sad, which is how I felt being in relationship with a lot of the American men that I had been in relationships with. So I thought I outsmarted it. At least I was conscious enough to state that I didn't want to date someone like my father. But it takes a little bit more than that desire, because there was so much more unconscious material that I had yet to uncover in my own personal therapy. And when I did, I was able to understand my repeating romantic reality and stop repeating it. Really, within 6 months of realizing that it was my early 30s, I met the man who would become my husband, Victor, which I don't think, if I had not done that work, if I had not understood this unconscious material, I can't imagine that I ever would have recognized Vic as my person. And that was 22 years ago. So I do know that this stuff works, not just with my clients, but it works in my own life. Hence why I want to teach it to you. All right, the third thing is knowing and embracing what you want. I find that a lot of times with clients, they would be embarrassed almost about what they wanted, or they would be in denial of what they wanted. Like, it doesn't matter. I'm cool being single. I'll just have careers. I'll just do these other things. At least that was my story. I was like, well, if this doesn't work out, I'll just have like 5 amazing careers and travel around the world, and I'll still have an amazing life, type of a thing. So I think it's really important that if being in a relationship is something that you want, that you embrace that. And coming at it to the best of our ability, of course, from a healthy place. But there's nothing wrong with wanting that. Some people really want children. Some people don't. And both of those things are perfectly fine, regardless of what other people think or say about it. So I want you to get really dialed into your heart's desire in a real way and embrace that, rather than make it wrong, or rather than deny it for fear that it won't happen. So again, I'll give you a little bit of some ideas in the cheat sheet of how to do that. The fourth thing is about boundaries, right? Because I love to teach you about boundaries, because they are one of the biggest game changers in relationships. So when you're dating, you have to assert your boundaries early and often. So what does that look like? It means telling the truth about how you feel, about what you want. It means calling someone out on if they don't keep their word, or if they don't do what they say they're going to do. It also means being aware of what is not aligned with the other person and with you, right? So we're moving into that. What is not aligned? Are you the one who says, I'll call you on Friday, and doesn't do it? Right? So looking at your own behavior, like, are you someone who keeps their word and says and does what they say they're going to do? And even just sharing your preferences, I consider that drawing your boundaries, being an effective communicator early and often. Because why wouldn't you want the person to know? It doesn't mean being hypercritical. So let's not confuse the two things. It's not about judging the other person. It's about sharing your actual preferences. What it is that you would prefer, whether it's what kind of food you would like to eat, where you would like to meet the person, how soon you are comfortable becoming sexual with someone. A lot of times, if we have the disease to please, if we are a yes person, right? If we have very malleable boundaries, we will find ourselves getting super dialed into the other person's reality, or what we think it is that they want. And when we lose sight of our own reality and what we want, we can end up doing things we later regret, potentially being sexual too soon because the other person wants to. If you don't feel that way, if you don't want to, this is a really important boundary that you draw in the dating relationship, regardless of what other people do. You have to be the person who decides what are the right boundaries for you. And really, obviously, only you can decide what that is, but it's getting really dialed into knowing that you have a right to how you feel and what you want. And having good boundaries also means that we know how to compromise. We learn to compromise. We can say a preference and the other person may push back and say, no, I really don't want that. I had that for lunch. Can we compromise? Well, of course. But how will you even get to a place of creating a relationship where there is compromise if you're not saying what it is that you want? Right? If that person cannot read your mind, most people take your word for it. So if you are saying things to please them or just agreeing with what they want to please them, they're like, okay, so that seems fine. She must like that or he must like that because they're agreeing. People can't really read between the lines, even though a lot of times, especially when it comes to boundaries, we wish they would. But to really be healthy with boundaries, you have to be able to share your preferences, needs, desires, deal breakers, basically. And I've done a bunch of episodes on this stuff in the recent past, so you could just go look for that and you will find it. Another thing is to look at, are you aligned? Right? What you know about this person, are you aligned? Right? A lot of times we're like, it's too soon, I don't know. But if you meet someone and they want to have children and they say it right up front in the beginning of dating and you know that you don't, then your goals are not aligned. And the longer we stay in relationships with people where we do not have similar ideas of life, visions of life, goals, and children are a very particular goal. That is a very common deal breaker that I've seen with my clients in my therapy practice, where one or the other will definitely want children and the other person doesn't want them. And now this is something that you don't want to cross your fingers and hope that someone's going to change their mind. So looking at if you're aligned, the way you live your life. Look at the way that you handle money. Once you really get into dating, right, you can get an idea of, are you a saver and the other person is a spender? How is that going to work? Who pays for what? Is somebody filing for bankruptcy and the other person is very responsible financially? Like, these are all ways of anticipating that there's going to be problems down the line around important areas of life. Now, I'm not saying that on the second date you need to ask them for a spreadsheet of their finances, but we can tell by the way people talk about what they do in their life as to how they're spending their money, how they're spending their time, how much do they do a lot of recreational drugs, do they drink too much? These might all be things that are non-negotiable deal breakers. And if you recall, a couple of weeks ago, I was talking about that in one of the videos, how important it is for you to know what your deal breakers are. Because if you see them early, that's the perfect time to basically cut your losses. Because so much of the time in my therapy practice, I would find people coming to me feeling like they spent too much time in a relationship that they knew a long time before was most likely not going to work out. And a lot of times with codependent connections and relationships, it is so incredibly hard to end the relationship, even though you know you need to. You just really don't know how, and are kind of addicted to the dance of the relationship as opposed to being happy in the relationship. But you don't want to wake up 10 years from now. And probably many of you watching this or listening to this are thinking, oh wait, I'm doing that right now. So if you're doing that right now, please consider this a gentle wake up. That if you're not happy now and haven't been for the past 5 years, if nothing is changing, if you're not changing something, if you're not in therapy together, what will magically happen that changes the dance in the relationship? Nothing. We have to change it with different interventions, different desires, but both people need to want it to be different in order for it to be different. Again, now going back to the sixth step is really paying attention to the alignment of words and actions. And pay attention to how the other person pays attention to you. Do you pay attention to them? Do they remember what you talk about? Do they know the names of your close friends? Do they remember work drama you told them about if you've been on a bunch of dates, right? Alignment. And alignment and listening sort of go together, because if someone's words and actions are not aligned, a lot of times they're also not a great listener. So I want you to really look at and don't just let it slide. This goes back to number 4, right? Boundaries early and often. We have to call the people out and be aware if it's you. I'm not always saying it's going to be the other person. What if it's you? Do you say to people, yes, I'll call you back. I'll whatever. I've had friendships, girlfriend relationships that I just can't be in a friendship with someone who doesn't keep their word because life is too short and I'm too busy. And the thing is, there'll always be issues of being disappointed. And this goes back to your blueprint. This goes back to your repeating romantic realities of really drilling down, understanding what might you be repeating unconsciously, even though you don't want to. So if you had a very disappointing parent, you might be, like I was, repeating that disappointment, unconsciously hoping to have a different outcome, right? These are all things that happen in this unconscious space, which is why I'm always trying to inspire you to bring this information from the basement to the main part of the house, which is your conscious mind, so that you can become empowered to make changes that will make your life happier, that will make you this irresistible master attractor of what you want. We don't want to be irresistible to psychos and narcissists, right? We want to be irresistible in an authentic way. And getting more real and taking these steps in your relationships, this is incredibly compelling for other people. Aren't you drawn to people who are confident? Aren't you drawn to people who speak truthfully? I have so much respect. And I'm very drawn to people who just tell the truth. You're like, oh, amazing. What a rarity. Be one of those people. And these are the steps that can help you get there. The 7th step is being aware of the other person's family and romantic history. I'm not saying that if they have a messed up family that you can not be with that person. I'm saying be aware of how they view their family. Is it legit? Do they have a terrible relationship with the people in their family because the family is super dysfunctional and they had to cut themselves off because the people were so toxic? Or is it something else? Right? Pay attention to the way they talk about their romantic history. Do they talk about every one of their exes as being psychotic? Because I promise you, that person is the common denominator in their life, and it can't always be other people. If someone speaks kindly of their ex, like it didn't work out, but we still have a respectful relationship, and I super wish her well or wish him well, that to me is a sign of something healthy, something good, and the capacity to not be super polarized in relationships. So pay attention. People are always communicating information, important data to us through what they're saying and not saying, through what they're doing and not doing. So your job is to pay attention to how they talk about these things, because it actually is important and can be very revealing as to you don't want to be another person on that list that they're talking about as being like a psycho, right? You're like, it's not possible that we're all 50% of every single relationship we've ever been in, right? So it can't be that the person you're dating who's talking about their exes as all being something wrong with them mentally. It can't just be the exes. It has to be this person as well. Why are they attracting unstable people, And are they going to do something crazy making to make you seem unstable and then tell that story about you? Well, we hope not, but it's a possibility. And the last thing on the list to truly becoming a master attractor and to becoming irresistible energetically, like you're putting it out there, is to work to fall madly and deeply in love with yourself. Is to actually put the energy into your mental health, your relationship with you, your inner dialogue, treating yourself with kindness, with love, treating yourself like you matter, because you do. Because the reality is that you basically set the bar for every relationship in your life, meaning your relationship to yourself sets that bar. People see the way you treat yourself. Do you have good boundaries? Do you sleep enough? Do you turn your phone off at night? I mean, unless you have teenage kids, but generally speaking, all of these ways, do you have good boundaries? Do you protect yourself and treat yourself in a healthy way? Do you eat well? These are all ways of loving yourself in a real way, the same you would a child that you adored. So that last tip is all about when you fall madly and deeply in love with yourself, you give off a particular energy of confidence, something that is very, very compelling. And that truly does make you a master attractor and irresistible. So, while that was a lot, I hope that you liked this episode of The Terry Cole Show. And this is just a tip of the hat to the person who sent in that question to me. I hope that this was helpful to you. If it is, please share it on your social media platforms. And also, remember, the link to my free workshop series starting on September 10th is in the show notes. And I can't wait to see you there. It is for women, though. Sorry, guys, I promise I'm making stuff for you, but this is for women. So to be continued, I hope you guys have an amazing week falling madly and deeply in love with you. And as always, take care of you.